and be very careful. There's no smoking on board. This includes e-cigarettes. There's no running on board. You're on a boat. You're really not going to get very far. Bathrooms are located at the stern of the boat on the very first deck. Speaking of the word stern, for those of you who don't know, the back of the boat is called the stern. The front of the boat is called the bow. The right side is called the wharf. Long Wharf was built in 1710. It is the oldest continuously used wharf in the country. This is also where the British soldiers evacuated from at the end of the Revolutionary War in defeat for the very last time on March 17, 1776. Coincidentally, man-made. How on earth did they create so much land? Well, Boston was built on the Shawmut Peninsula. Shawmut is a Native American term for living waters. This is in reference to the 3 surrounding hills that had fresh springs running through them. This was Beacon Hill, Pemberton Hill, and Mount Vernon. And they created this land by a process called wharfing out, in which they built wharves out into the water. They built a wall in between 2 wharves. They filled in the empty space with earth from these 3 surrounding hills, displacing the water. Built another wall, filled that space with earth, etc., 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 over many, many years, also using many different gravel filling techniques a little bit further inland, thus creating 3/4 of the land in Boston. This is something that I'll keep coming back to throughout the tour because it is pretty remarkable. So to the right side of the boat, now that we've turned around past these beautiful sailboats, you're going to see the shorter rusty bridge right here. This is the Northern Avenue Bridge. It's a turnstile bridge stuck in the open position. It's actually been stuck like that for years. They're finally going to take it down, build a brand new pedestrian walkway. But I mentioned this bridge because beyond it is where Griffin's Wharf used to be. And that's where the Boston Tea Party happened. You may have heard of the Boston Tea Party. So on December 16, 1773, a group of patriots, including Sam Adams, were very angry about the heavy taxation of tea and other goods from the British, especially because they were not being represented in their own country. So in protest, they threw an entire cargo of tea off of 3 Nantucket merchant ships. This was 92,000 pounds of loose leaf tea. A lot of tea. They did this stating no taxation without representation. This was one of the sparks of the American Revolutionary War. To the left of the Northern Avenue Bridge, we're passing this brick building with the mention the airport in a bit, I swear. South Boston Army Warehouse and Barracks. The building was built in 1910. During both World Wars, Long Wharf, where we had just pulled out of, you probably walked right by there. I think they have a lot of tents that are out there today, lots of beautiful flowers. But this greenway used to have an ugly highway on stilts running right above it. They called it the Central Artery because it ran right through the middle of the city. So taking these highways, putting them underneath the water and underneath the ground in tunnels has helped our city tremendously. We have... It's always cool when it lines up perfectly that way. It's the 19th busiest front gate. All of the water rushes into that hollow place. They take the ship in, close the gate, pump all the water out, leaving the ship what is called high and dry. They work on the hull of the ship, or the body of the ship. Once that's done, open up that gate, water rushes back in, they take the ship out, and it's ready to work. That's essentially that process. And of course, we're passing the Legal Seafoods Quality Control Center. You'll see this art installation of a codfish on top. The eye of that codfish will change colors depending on the wind speed. If the sun were down, you'd be able to see it changing lots of different colors. It costs Legal Seafoods $750,000 to build just the fish. But Legal Seafoods definitely has the money. For those of you who don't know, Legal Seafoods is underneath the water. In fact, we just went right over the Ted Williams Tunnel. So these tunnels were built as a part of the Big Dig construction project. The point of the Big Dig was to take the highways that were on stilts and bridges around the city and put them underwater in tunnels to make Boston itself more beautiful and more spacious. It accomplished what it needed to do in the end. It did. But it took way too long and it cost a lot more money than anyone was expecting. The Big Dig was supposed to end in 1998 the Pacific Way to make them safe for shipping out to sea. They go all over the world carrying millions of tons of supplies per year. Some of you might notice there's also a cruise ship that's docked there. That's the Black Falcon cruise ship terminal. So if you're going to be taking a cruise ship to or from Boston, that is where you're going to dock. I believe that cruise ship over there is the Norwegian Pearl. We've been getting her in a lot recently, so we have a lot of cruise ships that are scheduled for this year, which is really exciting because the last couple of years have just simply not been a good time for that. So that's the Norwegian Pearl over there. On our first instance of natural land, to the right side, a little bit ahead of us, you're going to see this fort. It is situated on Castle Island. I'm going to wait for this plane. Castle Island used to be an island, but it was filled in with man-made land connecting it to South Boston. There used to be a castle here. It was called the Castle William, but it was destroyed by the British in 1776 after evacuating after having lost the war. The fort that you see here today is called the Fort Independence. It was fortified in 1845. At the Boston Harbor Islands National Park. And Boston Harbor Cruises has because they together help me tell the story of the cleanup of Boston Harbor. Because if you look at the water today, it's almost entirely man-made. It used to be one of the shortest islands in the harbor. Now it is this. Shut that down. After that, it was a horse rendering plant. And 2,000 dead horses a year were brought to Spectacle Island and were rendered down to create glue and soap. Well, unfortunately, the story of Spectacle Island didn't really get much better after that. People of Boston decided they needed somewhere to put all of their trash. This became all of their trash on Spectacle Island. Thus, the island grew 36 acres. That's why it's the tallest island in the harbor today. Now, the problem with this is that we have a very windy city. It's not super windy today, but we have this smoldering, burning dumpster fire of an island did go out. They capped off the island with land that they had left over from the big dig. Today, Spectacle people of Boston sued their own city and won. So a structure was built. If you're looking to the right side of the boat, actually, there's this big ship is actually right in front of it right now. Once we clear it, you'll be able to see it. There's a structure that's composed of large white egg shapes. Just cleared that ship. You can kind of see it over that ship. Large white egg shapes. There's a windmill. Right over there. It goes up to 40 miles an hour, 360-degree spins. You will get wet. In fact, that's basically the whole. Beautiful Nantucket lightship. So for those of you who don't know, Nantucket is an island off the coast of Massachusetts, and they had lightships because of the 90 miles that surround the island, the Nantucket shoals. Shoals meaning very shallow water. So they wanted to make sure that ships were not going to run aground coming to and from the island, into and from New York, because Nantucket is on the way to New York from Europe. So they placed 3 of these ships around the island to prevent that from happening. Now, the sailors on these ships, they were on the ship for about 3 weeks, and they would take 3 weeks off. As you can imagine, you're on a ship for 3 weeks. It's just sitting there. You might catch some cabin fever. You don't really have anything to do. You need a hobby. You need something to do. So they started basket weaving. This is how we get the Nantucket lightship baskets. World famous baskets. A little bit further inland from here is the former site of Old Immigration Hall. So it's not there anymore, but around the 1840s, a lot of Irish immigrants came to Boston to escape the potato famine. One of the reasons why a lot of them chose Boston over New York is because Boston is 2 days closer to Ireland by boat than New York is. So when they got here, they would have registered at Old Immigration Irish need apply. Well, Boston is a lot better than that today. I'm actually happy to report that today we have the second largest population of Irish people in the world, only second to Ireland itself. Hence our huge St. Patrick's Day parade. Of course, our basketball team being called the Celtics. They won last night, I believe, didn't they? And they've entered the championship. So we'll actually be passing TD Garden their Instagram page to see what opening day is. I didn't know it was open today. That's awesome. Hey! So it is open. That's fantastic. It's called Tall Ship Boston. It is an oyster bar. You can sit out on the patio. You can go on the boat, have a drink, have a cocktail. It is really the place to be in the city. Very excited that this is open. So we've been waiting for a long time for this to be open. That was a pleasant surprise. We'll get a drink tonight. It's kind of the place to be in Boston. Now I'd like to point out there are 3 concrete blocks that are out. We're also passing Wharf. So that name, Ship Wharf, commemorates Donald McKay. He was the famous master shipbuilder who I mentioned back in Pierce Park, where his monument stands. He built clipper ships. Clipper ships were known as the Greyhounds of the Sea because they were really, really fast. His most famous clipper ship was the Flying Cloud. It was built in 1851. And on its first voyage, it traveled from New York to San Francisco around South America in a record time of 89 days. But when you have that money, I guess you can do that. These are luxury apartments that have just come up. Everything on the water is new. That confuses people because Boston is a very old city. But the reason why everything on the water is new is because people didn't used to want to be near this water. This used to be. Tomorrow will be a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and I can promise you this harbor will be packed with lots of different boats. And of course, all of you are a testament to this because now people want to take a harbor cruise. So thank you. Now we're passing this next bridge here, this green bridge. This is the Mystic Tobin Bridge. It's called that because it runs over Mystic River, and Governor Tobin was the governor when it was built. Not the most creative name, but definitely an interesting color. It is painted Fenway green, which is in reference to Fenway Park, where our Red Sox play. Bostonians love the hill. Nobody really knows why. It might just be a mistake by a map maker. Even more odd, the bunker was one of the first major battles of the Revolution. During that battle, the Patriot general told his men, "Don't fire till you can see the whites of their eyes." You've probably heard that phrase before in history class. He told them that because they were running out of ammunition. One of the last ships to be hit by a kamikaze pilot off the coast of Okinawa. When it hit, unfortunately, it did kill 22 sailors, but it didn't sink the ship herself. So here she stands at the Charlestown Navy Yard as a floating museum. And on the other side of the name, sides are made of iron. Her sides are not actually made out of iron, but it did give her the nickname Old Ironsides. In fact, on Memorial Day, which was very recently, they didn't have her out, but she was docked here, but she did do that 21-gun salute from her port left side, and my 11:30 tour got to see.
This were the whole.
Can we just explain?
Yeah, so the light goes in.
symbols that are coming from these structures are to look like the rigging of the Constitution. I'll wait for this helicopter. The rigging of the Constitution. So it's built with Boston's history in mind. It runs right over the Charles River. The Charles River has been nicknamed the most educated river in the country because it runs right past Harvard, MIT, and Boston University, so a very intelligent river. And of course, behind the Zaga Bridge, TD Garden, very important part of Boston today, home of the Boston Bruins and the Boston Celtics. They played there last night against the Warriors, and they won. Just got to win 2 more games, and then we'll have taken the championships. 2 nights? Yeah. We got to win 2 more games, right? I try to learn about Boston sports. I'm not a big sports, but last time I was at Fenway Park was to see Lady Gaga, so that's the type of person that I am. But I do try to do my research. It doesn't always end up right. Your dinner, go to Mike's Pastries and get a cannoli. Mike's Pastries is some of the best cannolis and puff pastries around. That's another staple of our city. There's Mike's Pastries and there's Modern Pastries. They're basically right across the street from each other. Every Bostonian has their own fiery opinion about which one is better. So since they're so close together, go to both. Make your own decision. Everyone wins that way. Next morning was the Battle of Lexington and Concord, the very first battle of the Revolution. And the first shots were fired. These were called the shots heard around the world. In fact, at the north end, there was a disaster being slow. It was an insane disaster. Waves of molasses as high as 25 feet high, and not without its fatalities. It killed 22 people. So we're passing a couple of these smaller ships here. Occasionally we'll get big cutters in. They are probably on some type of very important mission today. But this is Coast Guard Station. So white-hulled ships like the Sturgeon, they're for search and rescue. Black-hulled ships are buoy tenders. Red-hulled ships are ships that we never want to see. Those are icebreakers. They're going to break up Boston Harbor in case it ever freezes over. The last time that this entire harbor froze over was in 1904, so we haven't seen them in a really long time. This is salt water. It won't really freeze over. You might see some ice chunks in the water occasionally, but it won't really freeze. The U.S. Coast Guard was founded in 1790 by Alexander Hamilton. Originally, it was part of the U.S. Treasury, then it was a part of the U.S. Navy, and as of 2003, it's now part of Homeland Security. Their motto is Semper Paratus, which is Latin for always ready. And now we're passing Battery Wharf. You'll know it because of the blue and brick buildings on top. It's the Battery Wharf Hotel. Battery Wharf is where the 54th Regiment of the U.S. Civil War shipped out of. Very important regiment in U.S. history. It's the first all-African-American volunteer regiment in the country. You may have seen the award-winning film Glory, starring Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman. That'll tell you a lot more about that remarkable story. And less than a mile inland from here, at Boston Common, there's a monument that's dedicated to those brave soldiers as well. I'll also point out this the walkway that's hugging these piers and wharves right here. This is the Boston Harbor Walk. It's quite a newly constructed walk. It was built to bring Bostonians back to their roots, back to their waterfront. The entire walk is 47 miles long and counting. It's really long. That's because there's a new law in place. If you're going to build out onto the water, you have to include part of the Boston Harbor Walk, because Bostonians should always be able to see their waterfront, where they come from. It was really built as a response to the fact that our harbor today is just so clean. Now, there are 2 places around here where there is no harbor walk. One is where the Coast Guard is, and that's just for security reasons. The second is Union Wharf, which we're passing right now. This is a wharf with the 3-story brick condos on top. So these condos are built in the 1960s, so it's been grandfathered in. There's no walk here. However, these condos, they're 3 stories, they have 3 bedrooms, they come with 2 parking spaces, and one condo, if you're planning on moving to the city, one condo is going to cost you about $4 million. View of Boston skyline. I love this view. This is a good picture for those of you who like to take pictures. I will point out the clock tower right in the middle. This is the Custom House Tower. It was Boston's very first skyscraper, fully constructed in 1914. It's a white building with a gold dome, and in front of that is a green dome. And the yacht's going to be right in front of it, of course. So that green dome is called Quincy Market. It is the oldest open air market in the country. Behind that, the white building with the gold dome is called Faneuil Hall. It's called the Cradle of Liberty. This is where the Sons of Liberty met to discuss the revolution. Today, it's a great place to eat. It's a great place to shop. This is about a 2-minute walk from where we're going to dock. So that's a fantastic place to go to get some delicious Boston food. And of course, Faneuil Hall is just chock full of history. I'll also point out this white flagpole at the end of Long Wharf. It's about to line up with the middle of Long Wharf, and we will briefly get to see the old State House for just a moment. So if you line up this white flagpole right here, we're being harassed by a couple of patriots. Patriots didn't like that the British were there. They're throwing ice, snowballs, rocks at them, being very rowdy. The British soldiers fired into the crowd on impulse. They're